Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name is Sharon and I'm a trainee clinical psychologist, and it has been a hot minute since I have recorded a sit down video, but guys, I've missed filming so much and I've just missed this whole process, and I'm trying to figure out a schedule, but as you all know, training has just been a bit manic. So yeah, I'm happy to be back. Thank you for bearing with me, and also thank you for 3,000 subscribers. I honestly can't believe it, and it genuinely blows my mind that there are 3,000 people who have decided to click that little red subscribe button. So if you are new around here and you kind of like the look of my content, it's very much psychology related and I'm doing a few more study with me videos, then please hit the subscribe button down below and give this video a like. So today we're going to be doing a Q&A, and it's going to be all about the DClinPsy interviews. Dum dum dum. And just for full disclosure, I will not be disclosing any of the specific questions nor the specific topics that I was asked in the interviews, because I'm not allowed and I'd get in trouble. But I am going to be answering all of your questions, and the timestamps will be down below if you just want to have a look at the questions and click through. So the first question, and I got this question quite a lot, which is best advice for prepping. So the next video is going to be me talking through my DClinPsy interview folder, which is basically my folder that I used for all of the prep that I did. I'm a very kind of visual learner slash I need to write things down. So does that make me also like a kinetic learner? Is that what it is, the one where you have to move? I don't know, but I'm going to be sharing that with you in the next video. But in terms of preparing briefly, I would say to know your course, know what the ethos is, but also know what the role of a clinical psychologist is, and also your own skills, and reflect on all of those bits. But like I said, the next video will go into more details around that. Someone says, I'm worried about theory questions. What if they ask something you don't know? And I think this is such a common worry that people have. I definitely had it myself. There's no harm in saying that you don't know. They're not expecting you to be the full package. That is the whole point of training, and I know that's quite hard to like sit with because you feel like you're competing against all of these other amazing people, but you need to remember that you're amazing in your own right, and that there are going to be areas in your clinical skill set, but also in your kind of personal self, that you're going to need to either work on while on training, because that is what it is for. Like, training is to train you. So I think if you're worried specifically about theory questions, then try your best to look over theory while you can, you know, and look at those undergraduate topics that you probably do know and you're just not giving yourself credit for. If you get asked something and you genuinely have no idea, what I would say is say to them, like, I'm not too sure, but here's what I would do in this instance. I would either ask my supervisor, I would do some research, or this is a bit of a guess, but maybe I could do this, and suggest a theory that you know and see if you can work around. But I think the main thing here is that you do go in with a few theories here and there, but there's no shame in saying that you don't know, and there's no shame in not having a quote-unquote perfect answer, because there's not going to be a perfect answer. Where to begin? Any prep you can do before you even get an invite. What prep? So I was on the reserve list, so actually I didn't have an invite to a test like fully until I think it was 2 weeks before, or maybe a week and a half before. So I had to do that. Things you can do is look over, you know, the NHS constitution, the competencies for a clinical psychologist, maybe have a look on some forums. So the DClinPsy forum is always a great resource, and just have a little look at what other people have said about the interviews. I think another good thing to be practicing from the get-go is how you're going to manage your nerves, because I think that's where most people slip up. We all know that we're very like competent clinicians. If you're already in those kind of roles, so an assistant psychologist or a PWP, you probably do have the skills to get onto training. It's just the way that you present yourself through the interview and the application. So I think figure out ways to manage those nerves. Other things that I did were stayed on top of kind of current affairs in the psychology world, but also thought about how current world events impact psychology, or how psychology could be used to manage those things. So say for example the pandemic, like how did that impact psychology, and how could psychology impact the effects of the pandemic. Someone else asked, what's a good way to stand out? I hate being like cliche and giving you guys information that you probably already know, but it is to, you know, to be yourself, and that can be really difficult to bring to an interview, because you're obviously trying to impress them. They're people that you don't know, and you know, what part of your identity might not they like. But in terms of practical advice on how you can stand out and bring yourself into the interview, I would say is to really reflect on your values and go past kind of the like compassionate and empowering and things like that. What is truly important to you? You can even get the ACT values cards out maybe, and like have a look through at the different values, think about what's important to you as a clinician, and think about how you can bring that maybe into your interview. I would also say don't be afraid to bring some of your own flavour. Like, I remember kicking myself after the interview for saying like, but I've heard so many qualified psychologists speak way more casually than I have. Now, I'm not saying that you should, you know, start talking like you would with your friends and be like super duper casual and throw in all of the kind of slang terms that you know, but there's no harm in like just bringing yourself. And if you speak with an accent, don't feel like you have to kind of put on this proper English accent or whatever it is. Just try and relax, I think is my point here, is that you need to relax in order to show your identity, but also you need to show off your skills. And so again, you need to be really mindful, kind of present in the moment, and think about, okay, they're asking me this question, but how can I show off some of my other skills? How can I show them that I can make links to wider context? How can I make links to the 5-year forward plan? How can I make links to theory? So the reason why getting onto the DClinPsy site is really hard is obviously firstly because there's not that many places, but also because they expect so much from you in the interviews. And I think a really good way to stand out, and I'm not saying that I did it, and I'm not saying that everyone who gets on does it, but I guess if you were to be maybe like the ideal candidate, you would be making all of these links between, yeah, the wider context, service structures, pressures on the NHS, and yeah, theory, in order to kind of show your potential to be a clinical psychologist. Are there main areas questions are on, e.g. research cases? So I think most interviews follow a similar structure, but I'm only speaking kind of from my experience. But most interviews follow the structure of kind of a clinical section, a research section, and then potentially one that is kind of more personal. This personal section really does depend on what university you're being interviewed at, because I know some people will like delve deep into kind of your role in a family, but others are more kind of like thinking about how your identity impacts your work. So those are kind of the main areas. Now the way they will do this will very much depend on the course. So for me, in the research section, I was given a research paper, and that's what the research section was based upon. Whereas I know other courses kind of ask you to create a study design, and that would be your research section. So again, it really depends. You need to do your research, reach out to people who are on the course, or even on Twitter, or again, the DClinPsy forum. The information is out there, you need to just look for it. Someone else asks, what's your views on the balance between coaching and guiding prospective candidates? Ooh. This is a good question. You need to be very careful to not breach any of the kind of non-disclosure agreements that you sign. So when you go into these interviews and the application season and the tests, you say that you're not going to share anything from any content from it. And I think there's a difference between guiding people and telling people what is going to be in the test. Now, I'm not going to say this doesn't happen, because of course people want to help their friends get on, people want to help their families get on. It's a really difficult situation, and no one is going to stop people from sharing specific questions. I just think people need to be very careful with how they do it, because obviously it's not fair for other people, and also you need to protect yourselves if you're already on the course or if you're applying yourself. How much knowledge of stats or research methods is required? So for the interviews, again, it depends on your course. I would say kind of your undergraduate level stats is enough, because if you're given a research article, you want to be able to interpret the results and kind of think about how valid the paper is in terms of that. And so I think, yeah, undergraduate knowledge is fine. Okay, another question is, how do you bring your personality across, especially if it's a remote interview? I'm quite curious to know if interviews are remote this year. Like, I have no idea, but one tip, especially for remote interviews, is to make sure you're giving eye contact to the camera rather than the screen. It's a very small thing, but I think it does help. It does feel like there's more connection when you look directly into the camera. I mean, right now, I'm looking at my viewfinder, which is just above my camera, and it looks as though I'm almost looking at the camera, but I'm not. And so I think you can tell there is a difference between this versus this, and it's more personal. So one way to do this is to stick a bright sticker next to your camera so that your attention is brought to it while you're in the interview, and it's a nice reminder for you. I think that's my main tip really for remote interviews. Also things like kind of leaning forward when you're listening, just seeming engaged. Structure an example for sharing a case that went well. You need to think back to your standard kind of reflective models. So thinking about what happened. So you're going to paint the picture for the panel. You're going to tell them what happened. You're going to tell them what you did specifically. So don't delve into what other people did. This is about you. You're going to speak about why this was a very significant case for you where it went well. So what did you learn essentially? But even when they ask you about a case that went well, you always need to reflect on what you learned. And also why it makes you a good candidate for training. So that's kind of the structure in a roundabout way. Again, I can't be too specific. How did you cope with anxiety leading up to, during and after? Before the interview, I made sure to kind of have a really good morning. I actually vlogged the morning of my interview. I believe it's like a whole 72-hour vlog before my interview. I didn't do any revision the night before. I didn't do any revision in the morning, and I just gave myself a really lovely morning. I made sure that my clothes were ready. I made sure that I knew what I was having for breakfast, and it was a breakfast that I really love and that fills me up and makes me feel ready for the day. I also did like my normal routine in terms of I still did my workout, but I did, I think, like a dance workout to Ariana Grande because I knew that would put me in the best mood. And so things like that. So I wouldn't deviate too much from your normal routine, but maybe this is a time where you can prepare like your morning routine and make sure you've got something solid in place that you know will make you happy. During the interview, some advice that I got was before you answer any question, like take a breath, but to also make sure you feel your feet on the floor, like just move your toes around a little bit. And this will take like a second, but it makes sure that you are still in the room and that you're not running away with your thoughts. And that really helped. I also think from the get-go in the interview, be ready to ask them to repeat a question. There is nothing wrong with that. And I did this very early on in my interview. And I think once I did it once, I felt a lot better. I also had a pen and paper with me, and I asked them at the beginning, I was like, look, I'm quite nervous. So I just named it. I was like, I'm quite nervous. Is it all right for me to note down the questions? Yeah, I forget when I'm nervous, essentially. And they're like, that's absolutely fine. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I managed it during, I think. I think naming it is really helpful. And after the interview, I mean, again, if you saw that vlog, I had a bit of a meltdown, so I didn't cope very well with the anxiety. I got really upset because I thought I completely messed it up, and then I had a nap because I think my body just shut down and it couldn't handle any of the stress. But if I were to deal with it better, then I think I would be more kind to myself. I think I'd practice that self-compassion that we teach a lot of our clients. I would think about how well I did to get there. I would think about, you know, what I needed in that moment, and probably in that moment what I needed is a walk. I think I needed to get out of the house rather than kind of wallow in my tears. And then I probably also needed a bar of chocolate. So if I had thought about after, then maybe it wouldn't have been so hard on myself. Someone else has asked how to approach theory models applied to a clinical case. So when you're preparing your cases that you're going to bring to the interview, you need to think about, yeah, the models that you're using already in this preparation time. So you don't want to be doing it in the actual interview itself. Say, for example, they ask you about a case that you were challenged by. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to paint the picture, you're going to tell them why it's significant, and then when it comes to kind of, you know, maybe the intervention that you used, and if you're speaking about challenges around that, then speak about the model that you use and the theory associated to that model. I would also have some other kind of theories available to you to back up some of your points. Again, this is really frustrating because I don't want to give away too much, but say, for example, I mentioned the stages of change model. That's a great one to think about when a client is showing some ambivalence towards therapy, or maybe doesn't seem very motivated to engage. So that's a great one to use. And again, with that, you would think about, okay, what stage was the client in, and you noticed that, so what did you do? So that's kind of how you would approach it. But really, when you think about your clinical cases, you are using theory. Otherwise, what are you doing with them in sessions? So just reflect on what you're actually doing and don't overcomplicate it. If you're using CBT, then you're using the cognitive behavioural model. Think about, you know, what is cognitive theory? What is behavioural theory? Like, you are using it in your work, so you just need to break it down in your reflections. Someone's asked, structure for your answers, how long should your answers be? When you go into your interview, they always tell you how many questions there's going to be and how much time you're going to have. And so what you need to do is do a quick little maths equation in your head and work out roughly how many minutes you need to spend per question. But I don't think you should be caught up in looking at the clock while you're answering questions, because that's not going to be helpful for you. They will move you on if you're speaking for too long, but make sure you're getting all your key points in. So again, going back to that reflective model, that's almost like your checklist. So are you painting the picture? Are you telling them why it's significant? And are you reflecting? And are you relating it to wider context and also why it's going to make you a good candidate for training? If you've done all those things and that's taken you a minute and a half, then you're good to go. You don't need to waffle on, because that is another skill that they're looking at in the interviews. It's your ability to communicate effectively. And if you're waffling on for minutes on end about nothing, just so that you can hit this 4-minute, I'm not saying that is how long you should take, but say it is 4 minutes that you work out, just so that you can hit this 4-minute mark, they're not going to appreciate that. So focus more on the content rather than like how long you're speaking for. So focus on quality, not quantity. Do you ever truly feel good enough to apply? Personally, I don't think so. I mean, maybe that's because I was relatively early on in my career before getting on, but I think from speaking with other people, I mean, everyone on my course experiences imposter syndrome. So clearly no one truly feels good enough, and that is not an us problem. That is a kind of systemic issue in psychology where we're made to feel like there is such a lack in the careers, which there aren't enough, but there are also different routes that we can take, and we are also good enough. That is not our fault that there's not enough funding in the NHS for psychology. Yeah, I don't think anyone ever feels good enough ever, and that's why my advice is that if you have the means to, you should just apply and see how far you get. What is something you wish you included in your answers that you didn't/forgot to? So I actually did this in my interview where I missed out a massive chunk of an answer. Basically I basically didn't answer half the question, and so at the end of the interview they were like, oh, like, how did you think that went? I basically said, oh, I think it was, you know, a bit okay, I think my nerves got in the way, but also I left out this massive chunk for this question, so am I allowed to like elaborate on it further? And they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. And so I did, and so actually I didn't forget anything, because I was able to, in that moment, kind of remember that I'd forgotten something and then gone back and answered it. So that is kind of a big tip, is that it's okay to use that time to go back and answer a question again or add something to an answer. Anything you regret when preparing for your interview and wouldn't recommend? Oh, this is helpful. I think, let me have a look at my folder. So this is a sneak peek into my folder. It looks massive. It's not actually, I don't know why it looks so big. I do have some research articles in here, so please don't be alarmed. But this is what I'm going to be going through in the next video, so hit subscribe if you do want to see that. So having a look through that folder, I don't actually regret any of the stuff that I prepared, and I think that's because of kind of the networks that I had and my kind of DClinPsy buddy. So I was able to ask these people about the resources that were really helpful to go through. But one thing that I did go through was the whole NHS constitution. Don't know why I did that. I went through the summary version, but I also think that, you know, I think that might have been a bit too much, but it also did help my understanding. Like, I don't regret doing it because I really did learn more about the NHS, but I think that might have just been a bit extra because I didn't really mention it in my interview. It was just good to have that underlying knowledge. Someone asked, handling personal questions, how much to share, etc. You need to, again, reflect on this before you go in. Think about what isn't going to be too emotionally charged for you as well. So whatever you feel comfortable. Like I said, some courses really delve deep into the personal side of things, so I don't know how you manage that. I guess, again, you need to connect with people and have a look on the DClinPsy forum at the questions that are on there, because they do include some of the more personal questions, and I think go for the most personal question on there. think about how you would answer it and kind of protect yourself, because you don't know these people. You may never see them ever again, or you might see them again as your course tutors, and then they know all this information about you. Just really protect yourself is what I'm saying. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it and leave it in the room, do not share that, and you don't have to give them any information about you that you don't want them to know. That is your right. And so if you are in the interview and you are made to feel uncomfortable, you can just say you shouldn't feel forced into sharing information about yourself. Someone else asked, is there any role play or presentation required? So it depends on the course again. For mine, I had to do a role play, but I actually don't mind role plays, because for me, I find it quite, it's an easy part of the interview. How you can't act like a completely different clinician. You're just going to show them what your clinical skills are like, and so I think that's really helpful actually in the interview, because you're actually giving them a taste of what you would be like as a trainee. In terms of presentation, I haven't had that, and I'm not too sure what courses do. But in terms of the role play, it will usually be you with a client, and you'll be given a scenario, and it's kind of, yeah, you just in a session with them. But you're typically being assessed there more so on how you are with clients rather than what you do. So they're not expecting you to kind of whip out this amazing formulation and share it with the client and then figure out what intervention you'd use with them, you know? Because that would just be too much for a role play. So there are loads of people asking about how I prepared, and I'm not going to go into that in this video. I will be going into that in the next video. So make sure to subscribe so that you can stay tuned for when that comes out. If you did like this video, give it a like, and also leave any questions down below in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you, but also someone else might know the answer as well, so that could be helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to be back soon, and until next time guys, I will see you later. Bye.